It was just another ordinary morning at the market. The sun had barely risen, but the place was already busy with people. Shoppers picking fresh vegetables, vendors shouting out their prices, and the sound of children laughing in the distance. In the middle of it all stood Zora. Zora was not a woman who attracted attention. She was simple, calm, and always seemed to blend into her surroundings. Her dark hair was tied neatly in a ponytail, and she wore a simple green dress that was easy to move in. She wasn't there for anything fancy, just some fresh fruits and a few groceries for the week. Nothing more, nothing less. She walked through the rows of stalls, her eyes scanning the fruits. The vendors called out their prices, trying to get her attention, but Zara didn't look up. She was focused on what she needed to buy. To anyone watching, she seemed like just another woman in a hurry to finish her shopping. But things were about to change. As she reached for a basket of apples, she felt a hard shove. Zara stumbled slightly, but managed to keep her balance. She turned to see the man who had bumped into her. He was tall, rough-looking, and wore a thick black jacket despite the warm weather. His face was scrunched in annoyance, and his eyes were cold. "Watch where you're going, lady," he growled. Zara paused for a moment, surprised by his sudden aggression. She had not bumped into him. He had bumped into her, but Zara never liked confrontation. She kept her voice calm and polite, as she always did. "I'm sorry," Zara said gently. "Please be careful next time." Her voice was soft, but it carried enough to be heard by anyone nearby. She didn't want trouble, but she also didn't want to let his rude behavior slide. Zara knew that kindness could often stop anger before it had a chance to grow. But the man wasn't interested in kindness. Imran, as his name was, didn't appreciate being spoken to in such a calm and respectful way. His eyes narrowed, and his fists clenched. There were a few people nearby, all of them watching with curiosity. They could tell something wasn't right. Imran's anger was growing, and Zara wasn't backing down. Without a second thought, Imran raised his hand and slapped Zara hard across the face. The sound of the slap echoed through the market. For a moment, everything went silent. People gasped, some of them backing away in fear, others just standing frozen. No one moved to help her. Zara stood there for a moment, stunned by the shock of it all. She could feel the sting of his slap on her cheek, but she didn't cry out. She didn't scream. She didn't even raise her voice. Zara simply stood still for a moment. Her calm demeanor remained unbroken. Her eyes didn't show fear or pain, only quiet strength. She slowly wiped the side of her face where the slap had hit, her fingers brushing her cheek gently. And then, without saying another word, she looked directly at Imran. It wasn't a look of anger. It wasn't a look of fear. It was a simple, piercing look that seemed to cut through all the noise around them. It was the kind of look that made people pause, think twice, and wonder about the person standing before them. Imran, on the other hand, seemed unfazed. He smirked, his hands still in his pockets as he looked at her. "What are you going to do about it, huh?" he taunted. "You're nothing." The people around them were still watching, some of them too afraid to step in. They didn't know what to do. Some wanted to speak up, but they stayed quiet. It was clear that the atmosphere was tense, and no one wanted to get involved. Zara had expected this, though. She wasn't angry. She was simply disappointed. Imran turned to walk away, thinking that Zara would do nothing. After all, she had just been slapped in front of everyone. What could she possibly do now? But Zara didn't move. She didn't shout at him. She didn't run after him. She didn't try to fight back. Instead, she just took a deep breath, straightened her back, and calmly turned back to the stall where the apples were. She picked up the basket of apples, her hand steady, her movements slow and deliberate. The people around her didn't know what to think. Some were in disbelief, others were even more confused by her calmness. But no one expected what happened next. Zara turned and walked away, quietly, calmly, with grace. She walked past Imran, who was still standing there, his back to her. Zara's steps were steady, each one a quiet statement of her strength. As she passed him, the crowd watched in complete silence. It was as if the entire market had stopped, holding its breath, watching her walk away. Imran looked back at her, his face red with anger. "You think you can just walk away after that?" he shouted after her. But Zara didn't stop. She didn't even glance back. She just kept walking, her head held high, her eyes focused on nothing but the path ahead. The whispers started again as she left, the murmurs of people unsure of what had just happened. They had all seen the slap. They had all witnessed the rude man strike her in front of everyone. But Zara had done something no one expected. She didn't cry. She didn't beg for mercy. She didn't even shout. She simply walked away in silence. And as she disappeared into the crowd, the people in the market slowly began to realize something. There was something more to Zara than they had first thought. Zara walked away from the market stall, her steps as steady and calm as ever. The slap had stung, but it wasn't the pain that bothered her. It was the way people had stood there, silent, watching the whole thing unfold. No one had stepped in. No one had tried to stop it. In that moment, she realized how much work there still was to do, how many people let fear and indifference control their actions. She continued down the narrow path, blending into the crowd as if nothing had happened. The usual sounds of the market filled the air again. Vendors shouting their prices, the hum of conversation, the clatter of fruit being tossed into baskets. But it all felt distant to Zara, as if she were watching it from far away. She was used to staying quiet, used to staying out of the spotlight. It wasn't that she liked being invisible, it was simply safer that way. Zara was the kind of woman who preferred peace, who didn't raise her voice unless it was absolutely necessary. But this situation had been different. Imran had crossed a line. As Zara passed the bakery stand, she overheard some whispered voices. The gossip started almost immediately. "Did you see that?" a woman said. "He slapped her in front of everyone." Another voice replied, "Yeah, and she didn't even fight back. She just stood there. What kind of person does that?" Zara kept walking, her head held high. She knew the gossip would spread, but she wasn't concerned with what they thought of her. What mattered was that she had stayed calm, even in the face of violence. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Zara pulled it out and saw a message from her assistant. "Are you okay? I heard what happened. Should I send someone?" Zara quickly typed a reply. "I'm fine. No need to worry." She didn't want anyone to make a fuss. She didn't want to draw attention to herself. What happened today was just another reminder of the dangers that lurked in every corner. Zara had faced worse before. She had been trained for moments like this. But as she stepped into the small cafe at the edge of the market, something caught her eye. A group of young people, probably in their early 20s, were sitting by the window, staring at her with wide eyes. They looked familiar, though Zara couldn't quite place them. One of the young women stood up and walked toward her. "Excuse me, are you the woman from the market?" she asked, hesitating for a moment. Zara glanced at her and nodded, but she didn't speak. The young woman looked around nervously, as if making sure no one was listening. "We saw what happened. You didn't fight back. You just walked away. I thought you'd scream or call the police or something." Zara raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. "And what did you think I should have done?" The young woman shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know. I thought you'd defend yourself." Zara smiled softly. "I did defend myself, in my own way." The young woman blinked, trying to understand. "But you didn't fight back. You didn't even look scared." "I don't need to fight every battle with my fists," Zara replied calmly. "Sometimes the best thing you can do is to stay calm, even when people expect you to lose your temper." The young woman looked impressed, though she still seemed confused. Wow. I don't think I could ever do that." Zara smiled again, her voice gentle. "You don't have to be like me. You just need to be yourself. Trust me, that's more powerful than you think." The young woman nodded slowly, her eyes wide. "Thanks," she said softly, as she walked back to her table. As Zara sat down at a corner table, sipping on a cup of coffee, she couldn't help but think about the conversation. This wasn't just about one slap. It was about something bigger. Zara wasn't just any woman in the market. She wasn't just a victim of a rude man's temper. She was something far more powerful and far more dangerous to the people who underestimated her. Imran had no idea who she really was. No idea that the woman he had slapped in front of everyone wasn't just a simple shopper. She wasn't just another quiet, unimportant person in the crowd. She was a woman who had the power to change lives, to make a difference, to bring justice to those who needed it most. Zara wasn't just calm. She was controlled, calculated, and relentless. As the minutes passed, more whispers filled the cafe. Zara could hear snippets of conversation, people talking about what had happened in the market, discussing how shocked they were by her calmness. But the whispers didn't bother her. It wasn't her they needed to fear. It was what she represented. Zara finished her coffee, paid the bill, and walked out into the busy street. The sun was higher now, casting a warm glow on the pavement. Her mind was already focused on the next steps. She had to deal with Imran. She had to make him understand that actions like this came with consequences. But Zara wasn't going to rush. She wasn't going to make any hasty decisions. She would do this carefully. It was what she had always done: observe, plan, and then act. As she passed the market again, she saw Imran, still standing near one of the stalls. He was laughing and joking with his friends, as if nothing had happened. But Zara could see the faintest hint of nervousness in his eyes, a crack in the mask he wore. He didn't know it yet, but his life was about to change. He had made a powerful enemy. Zara walked past him without a glance, but this time, the message was clear. She wasn't the woman he had thought she was, and sooner or later, he would find out who she really was. The day was passing slowly, and the market had returned to its usual hustle and bustle. People moved through the aisles, chatting and bargaining, unaware of the quiet storm that had already begun. Zara, however, had a feeling that things were about to escalate. Her phone buzzed again. She pulled it from her pocket and saw a new message. "Zara, we need to talk. This is getting out of hand." It was from her assistant, Sophia. Zara sighed and rubbed her temples. She wasn't surprised. She had known that Imran wouldn't let the incident slide. His pride would never allow him to accept the humiliation of being ignored, of being dismissed by a woman he had tried to intimidate. Zara stood outside the cafe, looking across the street. The sun was beginning to dip lower, casting long shadows across the ground. There was something unsettling about the calmness of the evening, the quiet before the storm. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a call. It was a number she didn't recognize. Zara hesitated before answering. "Hello," she said, her voice steady but guarded. There was a pause on the other end before a voice finally spoke, a deep, rough voice filled with malice. "You made a big mistake today, Zara." Zara's heart skipped a beat. She knew who it was: Imran. The anger in his voice was unmistakable. "I didn't make any mistakes," she replied calmly. "You did. You should have known your place." "Woman," Imran spat. "You're lucky I didn't do worse than slap you. But don't worry, I'll make sure you regret crossing me. I always make people pay when they embarrass me." Zara stood still, listening to his words with a calmness that would have been impossible for most people. Threats were nothing new to her. In her line of work, she had heard far worse. The difference now was that Imran didn't know who he was dealing with. He thought she was just another woman he could intimidate, just another quiet, invisible face in the crowd. "You don't know who you're talking to," Zara said, her voice cold. "And you don't know who you're threatening." There was a sharp laugh on the other end. "Oh, I know exactly who you are, Zara. A woman with no backbone. Someone who takes a slap in the face and walks away like a coward. You're nothing to me." Zara's eyes narrowed, her grip tightening on her phone. She was done being quiet. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice low and steady. "And if you think you can scare me, you're mistaken. You've made a big mistake, Imran. You're about to find out who I really am." Imran chuckled, thinking he had won. "Let's see about that," he sneered. "We'll see if you can still walk away when I'm done with you." Before Zara could respond, he hung up the phone. She stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of the threat in the air, but she didn't feel fear. She had known this was coming. Imran had crossed a line, and now he would have to pay for it. Zara took a deep breath, her calm returning. This wasn't the first time someone had threatened her, and it wouldn't be the last. She had learned long ago that threats were only as powerful as the person behind them. Imran was nothing more than a bully, a loud, angry man with no real power. She pocketed her phone and walked away from the cafe, her mind already working. She had a plan, but it wouldn't be rushed. Zara didn't make mistakes. She had learned how to deal with people like Imran. Her work had trained her for moments just like this. Later that evening, Zara sat in her office, the soft light of her desk lamp casting a quiet glow in the room. She opened her laptop and began to type. Her fingers moved quickly over the keys, each word deliberate, each sentence measured. She was the head of a special unit, a division of law enforcement that worked quietly in the background. Zara had never liked to draw attention to herself. She preferred to stay out of the spotlight, handling cases that no one else wanted to touch. But what Imran didn't know was that she had more resources at her disposal than he could ever imagine. Zara wasn't just any woman. She wasn't just the quiet shopper in the market. She was the one who made the rules, who enforced the law, and who controlled everything in the background. The slap in the market had been a wake-up call, a reminder that people like Imran needed to be reminded of their place. As Zara wrote her message, she thought about her next steps. She knew that if she moved too quickly, Imran might get away. But if she was patient, if she let him make the first move, she could catch him off guard. And when the time came, he would regret ever crossing her path. Her phone buzzed again, breaking her concentration. She looked at the screen, her face hardening when she saw the name. Sofia. Zara picked up the phone. "Yes," she said, her voice businesslike. "Zara, I just got word. Imran's been telling people you're a nobody," Sofia said, her tone tense. "He's going around threatening you, spreading rumors that you're weak, that you're not someone to be taken seriously." Zara's lips curled into a small smile. "Let him talk. Let him believe whatever he wants. He'll find out soon enough that I'm not the person he thinks I am. I'm worried, Zara. He's dangerous. I don't think he knows what he's messing with." Zara's eyes darkened. "He will. He just doesn't know it yet." As the evening drew to a close, Zara stood up from her desk, her decision made. It was time to confront Imran, but not in the way he expected. Not with anger or violence. No, Zara had something far more powerful than brute strength. She had control. And she was about to show him exactly who she was. The next few days passed quietly, but Zara could feel the tension building. Imran was growing more brazen, telling anyone who would listen that he had been disrespected by a woman, and that he would make sure she paid for it. Zara didn't let it bother her. She was focused on something much bigger than petty threats. She knew that he was digging his own grave, and all she had to do was wait for him to make a mistake. She spent her days at the office, going through cases and running the division as usual. But there was a quiet edge to her movements now. Every step she took was deliberate. Every conversation she had was measured. She wasn't going to make the first move. Imran had to be the one to make the mistake, and she knew he would. Meanwhile, her assistant, Sofia, was working behind the scenes to gather information. Zara didn't need to rush things. Imran was an impulsive man, and in time, he would reveal his true nature. She just had to wait for the right moment. But that moment came sooner than she expected. It was late one evening when Zara received a tip. A reliable source had informed her that Imran was planning something. He was meeting with some of his friends in a secluded spot, and from the sounds of it, they were discussing how to intimidate her further. This was the opening she had been waiting for. Zara stood in front of her large office window, staring out at the city below. The streets were lit up, the hum of traffic rising in the distance. She had lived a life of quiet power, staying in the shadows and controlling situations without ever drawing attention to herself. But now, the time had come to bring the fight to Imran. She walked over to her desk, her fingers sliding over the keys of her laptop. In minutes, she sent out a series of emails to key members of her team, asking them to monitor Imran's movements. She wasn't going to confront him directly. No, that would be too obvious. Zara was always 5 steps ahead, and she had a plan. The next day, Imran was in a bar, talking loudly about the slap. He had made it his personal mission to humiliate Zara in every way he could. People in the bar were listening, intrigued by the drama unfolding. Imran's ego was growing by the minute. What kind of woman just lets a man slap her and walks away like nothing happened? He said, laughing and taking a swig of his beer. I'm going to make sure she never shows her face again. I'll teach her a lesson she won't forget. His friends nodded, laughing along with him, but Zara's trusted informants were there too, listening carefully. They overheard every word. That night, Zara received another message from Sofia. We have him. He's meeting with his guys tonight at the old warehouse on 5th and Pine. They're planning something big. Zara's mind was already racing. She knew exactly what needed to be done. The warehouse was on the outskirts of the city, a place known for shady deals and criminal activity. Imran was about to make his move, and Zara wasn't going to let him get away with it. Hours later, Zara stood in front of her car, dressed in dark clothes that helped her blend into the night. She wasn't just a woman who could handle herself. She was the woman who controlled every situation she stepped into. She wasn't scared. She was focused. She drove through the winding streets, arriving at the warehouse just as the sky began to darken. The area was deserted, the only sounds coming from the distant hum of traffic. She parked her car a few blocks away, leaving it hidden in the shadows. Zara wasn't alone, though. Her team was ready, waiting for her signal. Using her phone, she sent a quick message to Sofia. We're ready. Let's move in. Zara took a deep breath and began walking toward the entrance of the warehouse. She could hear voices inside, rough laughter, and the unmistakable sound of chairs scraping across the floor. Imran was in there, surrounded by his friends. He thought he was in control, but Zara knew better. She took a deep breath and walked through the door. The sirens grew louder, and Imran's bravado started to crumble. His eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape, but it was too late. Zara had already made sure that he had nowhere to run. Imran tried to hide his fear, but it was written all over his face. His friends, who had once laughed and joked with him, now looked uncertain, their faces pale as they watched Zara stand there, calm and unshaken. They could sense the shift in the atmosphere. This wasn't the same woman they had mocked and belittled in the market. This was someone else entirely, a force to be reckoned with. Zara stood in the doorway, her presence commanding. She was composed, yet there was an intensity in her eyes that none of them could ignore. She knew exactly how to control the situation, and she was using every bit of that control now. You thought you could scare me, Imran, she said, her voice low and even. But you didn't realize one thing. You've been playing with someone who is far beyond your league. Imran's jaw clenched. He took a few steps forward, trying to assert some power, but the fear in his eyes was undeniable. You think you can just walk in here and control me? You think this is over? His voice trembled, but he quickly masked it with anger. I'll get out of this, you'll see. You'll regret this. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Zara's lips curled into a slight smile, but there was no amusement in it. It was a smile of cold precision. I do know exactly who I'm dealing with, Imran. And that's the problem. Just then, the door swung open with a loud creak, and a group of officers flooded into the room. They moved swiftly, like a well-rehearsed team, surrounding Imran and his friends before they had time to react. The lead officer, a tall man with a stern face, stepped forward and nodded at Zara. "Everything's in place, ma'am. We've got him," the officer said, his tone respectful, but with an undercurrent of awe. Zara's reputation in law enforcement preceded her, even among those who hadn't worked directly with her. She wasn't just a figurehead. She was the one who made things happen, quietly and decisively. Imran's face went white as the reality of the situation hit him. He tried to back away, but two officers grabbed him by the arms, pinning him in place. "No, no," he shouted, struggling. "This is a mistake. You don't know who I am. I'll—" Zara stepped forward, her heels clicking softly against the concrete floor as she walked toward him. The officers parted to allow her to pass, their respect for her evident in the way they stood aside. She stopped in front of Imran, who was now on his knees, helpless, his eyes wide with panic. "Do you know who I am now, Imran?" Zara asked, her voice soft but laced with authority. "I'm not just a woman you can intimidate. I'm the one who makes the rules. I run the system that you thought you could escape from. And now you're going to pay for what you did." Imran opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He was shaking now, his pride shattered. All his bravado had evaporated in the face of Zara's quiet power. He looked to his friends for help, but they stood there, motionless, unsure of what to do. No one was going to save him. "You're going to jail, Imran," Zara continued, her tone unyielding. "You're going to face the consequences of your actions, and you're going to learn that people like you don't get to walk all over others without paying the price." The officers moved to cuff Imran, but he still struggled, pulling against their hold. "You can't do this. You can't arrest me," he shouted, his voice cracking. Zara raised a hand, signaling for the officers to stop for a moment. She turned to the lead officer. "Check his record. I want everything on him, everything he's done. No shortcuts. I want this to be thorough." The officer nodded, and with a quick movement, he pulled out a tablet, accessing Imran's criminal record. His face darkened as he read through the list of offenses. "He's got a history," the officer muttered. "Assault, harassment, fraud. Looks like he's been getting away with a lot for a long time." Zora's eyes narrowed as she processed the information. This was exactly what she had suspected. Imran wasn't just a man who liked to bully women. He had been hiding behind his wealth and connections for years, using his influence to avoid consequences. But no more. Zara was about to make sure that ended tonight. "Take him away," she said, her voice final. The officers didn't hesitate. They lifted Imran to his feet, and he continued to shout, but no one was listening anymore. He was a man broken, a man who had thought he was untouchable. And now he was about to learn just how wrong he had been. As Imran was escorted out of the warehouse, Zara turned to the rest of his friends, who were still standing there, silent and shocked. "You have two choices," she said coldly. "Walk away and never bother anyone again, or you'll end up just like him. The choice is yours." One by one, the men shuffled out of the room, their heads lowered, their confidence shattered. They knew now that they were no match for Zara. When the last of them had left, Zara turned to the officer in charge. "Make sure this goes to the highest level. I want his network exposed. Everything." The officer nodded. "Understood, Mom." Zara watched as the lights flickered in the distance, the hum of sirens fading into the background. She wasn't just dealing with one arrogant man anymore. This was about sending a message that no one could ever ignore. She walked out of the warehouse with her head held high, knowing that she had just taken down someone who thought he was invincible. But in the end, it was Zara who had shown him just how wrong he was. The next few weeks were a whirlwind for Zara. Word spread quickly about the events at the warehouse, and the media was buzzing with speculation. The man who had publicly slapped her was now behind bars, and his criminal activities were being exposed one by one. Imran's empire was crumbling, and with it, the people who had supported him. But Zara didn't take pleasure in his downfall. To her, This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about making sure that people who used their power and privilege to hurt others were held accountable. Imran had been one of the many who thought they were untouchable. But Zara wasn't just a victim. She was someone who understood how to fight back when the odds were stacked against her. As the investigation into Imran's activities deepened, it became clear that he was more than just a petty criminal. He had connections, dangerous ones. He had been involved in everything from bribery and corruption to organized crime. He had used his wealth and status to shield himself from the consequences of his actions. But no more. Zara was sitting in her office late one evening, reviewing the latest updates on Imran's case. Her assistant, Sophia, had just left for the day, and the building was quiet. Zara liked it that way. It gave her time to think, to reflect. She had always been a quiet observer, someone who preferred to stay in the background. But now, as the head of the police force, she was stepping into the light, and she wasn't going to back down. The phone on her desk buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from one of her trusted officers, Detective Samir. "Ma'am, we found something. You need to see this." Zara's fingers hovered over the keyboard as she read the message again. Samir was one of the few officers who had earned her full trust. If he said something was important, it was. She picked up the phone and dialed his number. "Samir," she said as soon as he picked up. "What have you found?" "Something big, ma'am," he replied, his voice serious. "We've been digging into Imran's financials, and we've uncovered a series of shell companies. But that's not the worst part. It looks like he was laundering money for a major crime syndicate. We're talking about some of the most dangerous people in the city." Zara felt a chill run down her spine. Imran had always been arrogant, but this was something else entirely. He had been playing with fire, and now the flames were closing in on him. "Get me the full details," Zara said, her voice steady. "I want everything on my desk by morning. We're going after them all." She hung up the phone, her mind already racing. This was no longer just about Imran. It was about taking down a criminal network that had been operating right under their noses. Zara knew that going after these people wouldn't be easy. They had money, influence, and power. But Zara also knew that they had one thing she didn't: fear. They were scared, and that fear would be their undoing. The next day, Zara gathered her team for an emergency meeting. She stood at the front of the room, her back straight, and her expression unwavering. Her officers, some of the most experienced in the department, listened intently as she laid out the plan. "We've got a chance to bring down one of the biggest crime syndicates in this city," she said, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. "Imran was just the tip of the iceberg. He's been laundering money for them. But now it's time to go after the whole operation." There was a murmur of agreement among the officers. They all knew the stakes were high. They had dealt with dangerous criminals before, but this was different. Imran's network was vast, and it was protected by people who would do anything to stay hidden. "We're going to need to work fast," Zora continued. "We don't have time to waste. We've got to hit them hard and hit them fast. We'll take down their operations one by one, starting with the shell companies Imran set up. We'll also need to gather intel on the people at the top, those who are pulling the strings. I want everything on them." A few weeks had passed since Zora's monumental success in bringing down Imran and his criminal syndicate. Her name had become a symbol of justice and unwavering strength in the city. Headlines celebrated her, and she had even received numerous awards for her work. But Zara, as always, remained humble. The recognition didn't matter to her. What mattered was the people she had helped and the difference she had made. But life, as Zara knew all too well, was never just about the victories. There were always more challenges, new battles waiting to be fought. And one day, as she sat in her office, looking over reports and preparing for her next big case, the phone on her desk rang. "Ma'am, you've got a visitor," her assistant, Sophia, said, her voice uncertain. Zora glanced at the clock. It was late afternoon. "Who is it?" "I'm not sure. He says his name is Imran Khan, and that he needs to speak with you. Zara's heart skipped a beat. Imran Khan, the same man who had slapped her in the market, the one who had tried to destroy her life. What could he possibly want now? Her mind raced, but she knew that this was no time to be emotional. She had dealt with worse in her career. Taking a deep breath, she composed herself. Send him in. A few moments later, the door opened, and Imran walked in, his face a stark contrast to the arrogant, confident man she had once seen. Now his shoulders were slumped, his eyes filled with exhaustion, and there was a noticeable tension in his movements. He had clearly seen better days. Zara studied him, her expression calm but unyielding. What do you want, Imran? He hesitated, then cleared his throat. I need to speak with you, Zara. Please. It's important. Zara motioned for him to sit. Go ahead. Imran sat down across from her, looking uncomfortable. There was a long pause before he spoke again. I know you're angry with me. I know I hurt you. And I regret it every single day. But I'm not here to make excuses. I'm here to tell you something important, something that could change everything. Zara raised an eyebrow. What could you possibly have to say that would change anything? Imran shifted uncomfortably in his seat, running a hand through his disheveled hair. You're not the only one who's been dealing with these criminals. I was part of something much bigger than I even realized. I thought I could control it, but it's bigger than anything I could ever imagine. Zara's mind began to sharpen. Was he trying to manipulate her again? Was this some kind of trick? She had learned to never take a criminal at face value, especially someone like Imran. I don't care about your regrets, Imran, Zara said coldly. You got what was coming to you. Your empire is destroyed. The people you hurt are getting justice. There's nothing more to discuss. Imran looked down at his hands, his voice breaking. It's not just that. You don't understand. There are others. Bigger players. People I never even met, who are now coming after me. They're threatening my life. They're after anyone who's ever been connected to them. I thought I could escape it, but now they've turned on me. I'm not safe. Zara studied him carefully. She had heard rumors of such powerful networks, of syndicates that had a grip on even the highest levels of power. But hearing it from Imran himself was a different story. Her instincts told her he wasn't lying. He was scared. He was in real danger. You're saying there are people after you? Zara asked, her voice more curious now. Imran nodded quickly. Yes, and it's not just me. There are others who were part of it. People who are still in danger. You can help us. You're the only one who can protect us. Zara leaned back in her chair, her fingers tapping on the desk as she processed this new information. Imran had never been this vulnerable before. She had always seen him as a dangerous, arrogant man who believed he was untouchable. But now he seemed like a broken man, desperate for help. Why come to me? Zara asked, still skeptical. You don't get to just walk in here and ask for protection. You've caused enough damage already. I know, he said quickly. But I'm asking for mercy, not for me, but for the people who are still trapped in this. I've seen the damage. I've seen the lives ruined. I don't want to be part of this anymore. I can't be. I'm asking for your help, your protection. Zara's mind raced. She had always prided herself on being able to take control of any situation. But this was different. Imran was a criminal, a man who had harmed so many people, including herself. Could she trust him? Was this just another manipulation, or was he genuinely scared? You want me to protect you, Zara said slowly. But why should I? You've done too much harm already. Imran met her gaze, his eyes desperate. Because you're the only one who can stop them. You're the only one with the power to end this for good. I've already lost everything, but I can still help you. I can give you names, information, everything you need to bring them down for good. But I need your help first. I need your protection. Zara took a deep breath. The situation was delicate, and she needed to think carefully. This could be the opportunity she had been waiting for, the chance to destroy the criminal network once and for all. But it also meant trusting someone who had already betrayed her once. Finally, Zara spoke. "You're asking me to trust you after everything that's happened. It's not that simple, but I'll consider it. I'll look into this, and I'll decide if your information is worth risking everything for." Imran looked relieved, but Zara wasn't finished. "But know this," she added, her voice firm. "If you're lying, if you're playing me, I'll make sure you regret it. This is your last chance, Imran. Don't waste it." Imran nodded quickly, his expression grateful but wary. "I won't. I swear." Zara stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. "We'll see. I'll get back to you once I've looked into this." As Imran left her office, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that something much larger was at play. She had a feeling this wouldn't be the last time their paths crossed. For the first time in weeks, Zara felt the weight of the next challenge. The criminal underworld she had been fighting wasn't just local, it was global. And it seemed that her fight was far from over. The real question was, how far would she be willing to go to make sure it ended for good?